Are you shopping for a track bike? Well, this is the video for you. Welcome to the channel where we are all about track bikes, track days, and the track life. I hope you guys have a good time. So my favorite thing to do is to ride motorcycles on track. My second favorite thing to do is to buy or shop for a motorcycle to ride on said tracks. So if you just finished your first track day or you've done a few track days and you realize, hey, I don't really want to keep tracking my street bike and I really want something that's dedicated for the track, this is the video for you. And just for context, in the last year alone, I bought something like 4 track bikes and I have 2 more on order. So in a way, I feel like I'm a professional track bike shopper. So I'm highly qualified to do this, guys. I'm highly qualified, okay? All right, so what I want to do is walk you guys through some of my recommendations for what I think are the best track bikes for 2022. And why I say 2022 and why that's important is because bikes constantly evolve, right? And one of the benefits of being a rider today is you get to take advantage of all this new innovation, all these new machines that are coming out. And it's just a great time to be a rider. So I hope you guys are excited. And before we jump into my recommendations for track bikes, I want to say that this is specifically for track bikes, not race bikes. And if you're into club racing or you're getting into club racing, selecting a race bike is a little bit different criteria. And if you want me to make a video on that, I'm more than happy to do that. So just leave a comment below. But today we're really focusing on track bikes. So what is a track bike in the first place? Well, the truth is that anything can be a track bike, quite literally. So if your organization or your track allows you to ride a Vespa, that can be a track bike. If your organization lets you ride a Grom, that could also be a track bike. So it just really depends, right? And so the definition of a track bike can be quite loose, but in general terms, when we talk about a track bike, it means it is a motorcycle that's dedicated to be on track. Therefore, it doesn't have to have bodywork for the street, for example. So you won't see headlights, you won't see mirrors, you won't see brake lights, right? And so there's just less things and less stuff on a track bike. And also, very, very importantly, the tire compounds are typically different. Although you can very much track a street compound, however, you'll likely reach the limits of the street tire's capabilities much sooner than if you were to use a track day dedicated tire or a race slick. So that's really it in terms of what you could consider a track bike, right? And a lot of people that are getting into the sport will usually have a street bike and a separate track bike, or you can try to do double duty, but eventually at some point you're gonna say to yourself, I'm tired of this, let's just get a track bike. So this is all about helping you make the right decision. Final note before we jump into the list of recommendations that I'll provide the list price for new prices of the bike as well as used prices. But do keep in mind for used prices, that's gonna vary from region to region. Used bikes will also have some variation based on components like suspension or exhaust systems on the bike already. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at used prices. All right, let's do this and get into the list of recommendations. Let's start with the lightweight class and work our way up. In the lightweight class, you have quite a few options. You've got your KTM RC390, you've got your Yamaha R3, but my pick for the lightweight class is actually going to be the Kawasaki Ninja 400. The Kawasaki 400 has been proven in the last couple of years to be really, really capable, both for track day riding, but also for racing. The reason why I recommend the 400 over, say, the R3 or the RC390 is simply because the bike actually has a little bit more power so that you enjoy it in a track day environment. And what I mean by that is that a track day environment is very mixed. You can be out on the grid for your session with anything from a Panigale V4 or an S1000 to your R6s and 600s and 750s, all sorts of bikes. You really don't have a choice of who you're out on the grid with. And as a track day rider, the most important thing is that you have fun. And if you're on a really, really lightweight bike, I mean really lightweight, like a Ninja 250 or an R3, you will get absolutely walked on the straight, just absolutely obliterate on the straight. And you might catch up on the corners, you might pass someone in the corner, but I can tell you from my own experience having tracked cars and bikes that are lightweight, it's just not fun in a track day situation. You know, you work really, really hard to maybe make a pass, and then next thing you know, they just blast right by you, and like, it gets old. Now, some people might be fine with that. Truth is, I think most people will get a little bit frustrated with it, and it might be discouraging. So I think because we were talking about track days, the emphasis really should be on having fun. And the benefit of the 400 is that it has just enough power where on small or medium-sized tracks, you can actually start to catch up a little bit in order to be able to make it up in the corners. And that way you can actually have a fun day of just riding around on the track and not getting constantly passed or lapped by bigger bikes. And I think that actually is a big factor for just enjoying yourself on the racetrack. And the other benefit of the 400 is that the bike is a very economical, budget-friendly option to run as far as track bikes go. A brand new Ninja 400 in the US is going to retail for $4,999 plus titling and fees and all those sorts of things, which makes it quite budget friendly compared to some of the other options on the list today. And because the 400 is quite a flexible platform, meaning that as you get faster, you can definitely upgrade suspension. You can do all sorts of upgrades to make it perform even better. The bike actually has plenty of room to grow into in terms of skill and speed. For riders that are looking for a bike to start with, to learn with, to develop and to grow with, Ninja 400 is a great option. Let's move into the middleweight class of bikes, which I think is really exciting because there are so many options now. There are twins, there are triples, there are inline fours, there are all sorts of different options in the middleweight category, and the definition of middleweight is actually being redefined right now by a couple of different options that are available in the market. So for the middleweight twins bike, I would recommend the Yamaha R7. And I would absolutely love to recommend the Aprilia RS660 over the Yamaha. And what I've seen in terms of reliability issues with the RS660, for the purpose of a track day bike, you want something that's hassle-free, that you can just jump on, turn key, and ride and enjoy yourself on the track. I think the Yamaha R7 fits that bill very, very nicely. The Yamaha R7 is powered by a 689cc twin engine that puts out 106 horsepower with 50 foot-pound of torque. And those are actually very respectable figures, especially if you're talking about track day riding, right? There's plenty of power to enjoy yourself on track, and the bike is very, very capable in the turns, in the corners, and just a really, really great platform for you to build on top of and enjoy as a track day bike. And it's also quite affordable relative to other middleweight options. A brand new Yamaha R7 retails at $8,999. Now, I do know that there's some supply issues right now, and so there are some dealer markups. You can probably find a used one between $8,500 to $9,000, which is quite reasonable for a turnkey track bike for a novice or intermediate rider. And if you're more advanced, you can definitely look into upgrades in terms of the suspension and the body work and other things that you can do to the bike. So there's plenty of room as well for modifications as you grow as a rider and become a faster rider. Now, I do have to say, if you are looking for a track bike for the purpose of just having fun and you don't really care about classes in general, but you do want a middleweight bike, I would look at either a Daytona 675 or a Street Triple 765 RS, because the triple motors are just so fun to ride on. It's gonna provide you more torque than an inline four, and it's gonna have really good top end so you can keep up with pretty much anything on track. And it's just a very enjoyable experience. And I also think that it's fun to have something a little bit different. The Street Triple RS is actually really, really, really capable on track, even in standard form, even in the naked bike form. I know a lot of people are like, oh, you know about the headlights. Well, forget about the headlights. You don't see the headlights when you're on the track. But what you do experience is the agility and its power and how good it is as a package. So the Street Triple RS is a perfectly fine and great track bike for pretty much any skill level until you get to the point where you're like, I want to go club racing. Now, the benefit of the Street Triple RS is that you can actually get clip-ons and get bodywork to look either like a Daytona or a Moto2 bike, which I think looks super awesome. And so there's room there to even modify it to make it look more sporty or be more sporty should you need to. And in fact, Brandon Posh just won the Daytona 200 on a modified Street Triple RS. I can tell you it is a very, very, very good option if you're in the market for something a little bit different and more unique than your traditional inline four 600cc experience. The Street Triple RS is going to retail around $12,850, but you can find very, very good examples of them in the used market for anywhere from $7,500 to $8,500 for a 2019 or 2020 and up Street Triple RS, which I highly, highly recommend. So let's move a little bit further up in that middleweight category. And I keep saying middleweight because that's actually how these bikes are categorized now. They're called super sports, right? And so at the upper echelon of the middleweight class of bikes, my recommendation is the Panigale V2. And the Panigale V2 is my option for your kind of bigger middleweight bike that isn't quite your 200 horsepower monster. And the reason why I recommend the Panigale V2 is that it's a very, very, very fun bike to ride. I've ridden one before and I actually really enjoy it. I was looking at getting one as my dedicated track bike / race bike until KTM announced the RC8C, which to me was kind of a no-brainer. But if I were not to go down that route, I would definitely pick the Panigale V2. And I think that the power output of around 150 horsepower with around 75 foot-pound of torque, that's so much power. That's so much power, that's so much speed, that's so much torque. That's just so much bike for pretty much all of us, right? Unless you're super, super good, unless you're an expert racer or even beyond that. I think that bike will satisfy 99.9% of riders out there for the track day experience. And the other thing that you can't get away from is that it's beautiful. The great thing about the Panigale V2 is that it's styled after the V4, the new generation of Panigales, and not the older 959. A beautiful bike, it looks absolutely amazing. The fact that it's now being raced in Moto America and other series means that there's gonna be more parts available, so you can get track body work pretty easily now. You can get parts if you want to as well. The consideration here to make is that it is a Ducati, and therefore it is substantially more expensive than the other options we've talked about. And the Panigale V2 is going to be around $17,200 MSRP plus fees. But every now and then you can find a used one for around $14,000 to $15,000 on the used market. And because it's a Ducati, you know it wasn't ridden. So it was probably taken to a coffee shop, and that's about as much riding as it got. So it's not gonna be abused, so you can buy with confidence. All jokes aside, it's probably still under warranty, so it's a good bike to have. That leads us to the final category of track bikes, which are the heavyweight bikes, which are your 200 horsepower monster of machines. I'll be really honest with you guys. If I were new to track day riding, if I were in the intermediate group even, I would not consider getting a heavyweight bike, simply because the overwhelming power can be overwhelming. It can be very, very scary as you go into corners and you end up just braking and just parking in the corner and kind of losing the joy of learning how to turn properly and learning proper technique and skill. And the other thing is that a lot of these bikes have so much electronics on them, they provide a very real crutch to your riding skill and riding development, where you kind of don't even know that you're being assisted so much, and you kind of miss out on the joy of becoming a better rider, right? And as the saying goes, it's more fun to ride a slow bike fast than a fast bike slow. But if you were to insist that, no, I really want a 200 horsepower super bike as my track day bike, I'm not gonna stop you. My top recommendation would be the Aprilia RSV4. I think that the bike is just an absolutely amazing machine on track. I've ridden my friend's factory on track before, actually 2 different generations of them, and they're both just incredibly light. They're both incredibly agile. A lot of people say that they feel like a 600, but with a lot more power. That's actually very, very true. I think the benefit of an Aprilia V4 is the V4. The engine itself, because it's a V4, it has a more narrow profile, and so the bike itself can be a little bit smaller and not as bulky as, say, a ZX-10R or inline 4. Because it's also an Aprilia V4, you have the sound. The sound is to die for. It is absolutely the best sounding bike in the market as a production bike. I just absolutely love it. If you were looking at getting a new Aprilia RSV4, I would strongly recommend getting the base model RSV4 over the factory. And that's not just because it's $7,000 cheaper at $18,999 MSRP. It's because of the suspension. Now, the Aprilia RSV4 factory has incredibly good hardware, but the problem is that it has a very intrusive electronic suspension system. And if you're a faster track day rider, you want to be able to tweak and dial things a little bit more easily. And so the mechanical suspension on the RSV4 base model will be better for the super experienced track day rider. So save yourself the $7 grand and buy the base model, and then just spend all that money on better tires or even wheels. You can even upgrade the wheels to forged wheels and then spend more on the track days itself. For my final heavyweight recommendation, for those of you that are well-heeled and have absolutely no limits, my recommendation is a 2022 Ducati V4S and not the V4R. And the reason why is because the V4S is going to be more friendly for your track day rider. The V4R is very specifically built for the purpose of racing. That's why it runs a 998cc V4 engine, which has a higher rev limit than the V4 base or the V4S, which runs an 1103cc V4 engine, which is non-homologated for the World Superbike Series. And so the V4R is obviously extremely expensive. I think the newest model is something like $47,000 up. The V4S is somewhere around $28,000, $29,000 MSRP. And the V4S is actually just gonna be the bike that's gonna be more usable and more enjoyable for your average track day rider, if you insist on having a 200 horsepower super bike, right? So I would consider the V4S over the V4R. And I think that, for most riders, if not all riders, that's gonna be perfectly adequate as the track day bike. All right, so those are my recommendations for lightweight, middleweight, and heavyweight. I'll put a link to the list below of all the bikes that I researched and talked to people about and gathered before I made this recommendation list. I do have some very important takeaways that I want to share with you before we go. The first of which is that just have fun. Just make sure that whatever bike you decide on, it's all about having fun. So don't feel pressured to ride this or that bike based on what someone says or what they think you should be riding. You should be riding for yourself. You should be riding to have fun. You should be riding to enjoy the experience, right? Because track riding is a high intensity, high stress environment. So just why not make it more enjoyable and ride the bike that you want to be on? Now, the other very real thing to consider is budget. Now, as you can tell, you can spend pretty much as much money as you want on a track bike. There literally is no limit to this sport, right? But the most important thing in regards to budget is you should really focus on seat time. That is actually the most important thing for pretty much anyone and everyone at any point of their track day life, track day experience, or track day journey. So say your budget is $15,000 US for the whole year, okay? What I would recommend is allocating half of that to a bike. So in this list, maybe a used R6 or a Ninja 400, right? And then using the other half of your budget for tires and track fees and fuel, right? And especially given how expensive fuel is right now, be really cognizant of your budget, be realistic about it. What I don't want to happen to you is, being stressed out about the money to make a track day, right? Like, that's not fun. Like, trust me, when I was getting started with track day riding over a decade ago, I was in a very different situation and I had to budget every single thing, and sometimes I would blow my budget and it would just be so stressful. And like, you're worrying about, if I crash this thing and I can't afford to repair it, or I can't, afford to go to this track day. Like, don't put yourself through that. Get the cheaper bike and then maximize the seat time, and as your situation might change or improve over time, then get the nicer bike and then kind of just expand from there. But don't overburden yourself so that you can just enjoy yourself and have fun, because again, that's the most important thing. The third thing is, if you're going to buy a bike for the purpose of track day riding, if you buy a new bike and modify it to become a track bike, that's a very expensive route to go. In fact, if you go with the new bike to track bike or race bike, or if you go from even a street bike to a track bike, you're gonna be spending 50%, maybe 100% of the bike's worth back into parts, labor, whatever it is, right? And of course you can save money if you build it yourself, that's the case. But still, it's gonna be a lot of money versus just buying a dedicated track bike. Now, obviously, if you buy a built track bike, you don't really get to know the true history of the machine. You don't really get to know exactly how it was built, what it's been through, etc. So you forfeit some of that transparency. So just, it's the pros and cons, right? So there's trade-offs here. My first track bike ever I bought used from a racer in San Diego. I drove 24 hours round trip for it. It only cost me $2,100. It was a Ninja ZX6R, and the transmission didn't work well. I had many scares on track with it, with false neutrals, and it was cheap, but that was the trade-off, right? And so I don't mean to scare you guys, but just take that into consideration and try to find an honest seller if you can, with maybe a good reputation in the community, so that they can back up their claims and the bike is in good condition, because I don't want anyone to get hurt just because they need to get a cheap bike. And then the final thing here is, where do you even buy a track bike? Say you want to buy a built track bike. There are many different regional forums. So if you're in the West Coast, there's the Bay Area Riders Forum, or BARF. East Coast and the South as well. There's also the racing communities like the CMRA or the AFM on Facebook. So you can join those communities and see what people list as well. And the final place is the Where Classifieds, which is a website or a forum dedicated to the racing community there, and they have a lot of race bikes or track bikes for sale. I'll post links to all those below, and I hope that helps you with your hunt for your track bike. If you have any questions or comments about, where do I find my track bike, or should I consider this or that, let me know in the comments below. I love shopping for motorcycles, so let me know if I can help, okay? All right, and if you guys are new here, I hope that was fun and you choose to subscribe to the channel. Please also leave a like, because that really helps with the YouTube algorithm and helps people discover the channel. And thank you so much, and I'll see you guys on the next video.